Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something pretty specific. We're diving into a set of historical sources about the Russian Revolution. But not just any history. We're looking at it through a particular Marxist lens, one that claims to preserve, well, the authentic tradition.
That's right. And these materials, they offer quite detailed analysis, historical background, and even, interestingly, eyewitness accounts. They come from an organization that's, well, dedicated to what they see as the original ideas of Marxism and Bolshevism. They argue the real spirit got lost or corrupted later on. So a very focused viewpoint, definitely partisan, but it gives this really powerful narrative.
Okay, so we're sort of bypassing the standard textbooks here and getting into the internal arguments, the theory behind it all. The sources seem to argue that history often gets rewritten, maybe to cover up the real revolutionary drive. So to follow their argument, we're going chronologically, starting right at the beginning with the first cracks in the system.
Exactly. And that starting point, the real catalyst, according to these texts, was Bloody Sunday back in 1905. They describe it vividly, how a spark started a fire. That's the phrase they use.
Right, let's picture this. We're talking 120 years ago, January 22nd, 1905. You've got tens of thousands of workers in St. Petersburg. They're unarmed, marching to the Tsar's Winter Palace. And they weren't trying to overthrow him, not then anyway. They just had a petition.
Just a petition, appealing to the Tsar as, the little father. But the response, brutal. Tsarist soldiers just opened fire. Fired right into the crowd, hundreds killed, thousands wounded. And the key thing here, politically speaking, is what that did. It absolutely shattered that almost mythical connection between the Tsar and the people. That was the moment, they argue, the masses realized appeals wouldn't work, that they'd have to fight the state itself.
Wow. So that violence directly sets the stage for the leadership needed to actually, well, lead that fight. And when the sources talk about leadership origins, they really zoom in on the young Lenin. They make this pretty bold claim, don't they, that the ruling class has churned out industrial quantities of lies and distortions about him.
Yeah, it's a strong statement. What they're pushing back against, it seems, is this idea of Lenin as just, I don't know, an academic theorist or someone who just seized an opportunity. They really stress his early years, how he was made into a revolutionary step by step. They talk about founding Iskra, the newspaper, which wasn't just about spreading ideas. It was crucial for, knitting together all these scattered Marxist groups into a single party structure.
Ah, okay. So Iskra was an organizing tool as much as a newspaper. And this organizing work leads up to that key moment, the Second Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. That's where the Bolshevik faction really starts to take shape, right? So it's presented less as sudden genius, more as this careful, deliberate building process. They even mention small things, like a May Day leaflet he wrote way back in 1904.
Exactly. It's about the groundwork, the theoretical and organizational foundation built over years. That's what, in their view, makes 1917 even conceivable.
Right. And speaking of 1917, the sources don't mince words. They call it the greatest event in human history. That was 107 years ago, November 7th, 1917, the moment the Russian working class took power.
A monumental claim, yes.
Yeah.
But the sources immediately pivot. The victory was just the start of the problems. That freshly minted Russian Soviet Republic, as they put it, instantly faced threats from everywhere in 1918. We're talking foreign armies invading, sabotage by former officials, internal revolts, basically everyone who lost power trying to strangle the new state in its cradle.
So, incredible external pressure. But that also fueled internal debates, didn't it? Fierce ones. Lenin wasn't just fighting armies, he was fighting critics within the socialist movement. Like that famous clash with Karl Kautsky, the German socialist. Lenin called him a most learned armchair fool. That's pretty harsh language. What was that really about?
It boils down to the absolute core difference between revolution and reformism, you see. Kautsky argued socialists should stick to parliament, build power slowly, democratically, cautious. Lenin, by seizing power in 17, just blew that whole idea up. So Lenin's attack, according to these sources, was about Kautsky fundamentally rejecting the act of workers and peasants taking power themselves outside the established rules. They paint Kautsky as this brilliant mind who just blinked, who got scared when the theory demanded real, messy, revolutionary action.
Okay, that clarifies the intensity. It wasn't just a disagreement, it was about the very soul of the socialist project at that moment. And they provide more than just theoretical debates, right? There are actual glimpses of life then.
Yes, exactly. The materials mention these really quite amazing eyewitness reports from Russia in 1920. So the revolution in its third year. They talk about astonishing articles and photographs offering a priceless panorama. It gives you a feel for the time, the struggles, the atmosphere, countering later narratives that it was doomed from day one or inherently corrupt.
Interesting. But the story doesn't stay there. It shifts focus again, doesn't it? From fighting enemies outside to fighting decay inside. This brings us to what the sources frame as Lenin's final, maybe most important, struggle, the fight against bureaucracy.
Yes, this is a huge point for them, absolutely central. They stress that Lenin himself spotted the early symptoms of bureaucratic degeneration in his last couple of years of active political life. And this wasn't just, bad paperwork. It was the rise of a privileged group within the party and the state, people becoming separate from the ordinary workers, undermining the whole idea of workers' democracy that 1917 is supposed to be about.
So he saw this happening, and he spent his last months, even while seriously ill, fighting it, leaving behind what these writers call a vital heritage of struggle. What form did that take? What was the key text?
That would be the postscript to his letter to the Congress. We mostly know it today as his testament.
Hmm.
And it was, well, political dynamite. It had these frank, sometimes brutal assessments of other leaders, including Stalin, and crucially, it proposed changes to the party structure, things like expanding the Central Committee, bringing in more workers, ways to try and counteract this bureaucratic drift he was so worried about.
So it was more than just his thoughts, it was a concrete plan for reform, to try and save the revolution's democratic core from this internal rot.
Precisely. And this final fight of Lenin's against bureaucracy is explicitly presented in these sources as the real starting point for the anti-Stalinist left opposition. They saw themselves as carrying on Lenin's last battle, his unfinished business.
Which leads us directly to Leon Trotsky. After Lenin died, he became the main figure leading that opposition. The sources describe him in pretty epic terms, a revolutionary titan whose sacrifices kept the authentic traditions alive.
And the cost of that fight was immense, almost unimaginable. The sources don't shy away from the grim details of his death. August 20th, 1940. An assassin sent by the GPU Stalin's secret police attacked Trotsky in Mexico. He died the next day. It was a direct political assassination ordered by Stalin.
And it wasn't just him. The sources emphasized the violence wasn't purely political, it was deeply personal, targeting his whole family. They mentioned the account of his grandson, Esteban Volkov, who ended up looking after the Trotsky Museum.
Yes, Volkov's own story is harrowing. It really brings home the brutality. Just months before the final assassination, May 1940, there was another attack. Stalinist agents sprayed their house with machine gun fire. Volkov himself, just a teenager, 14 years old, was wounded in that attack. The sources call it a miracle they even survived that first attempt. It just underscores the lengths the Stalinist regime went to physically eliminate not just Trotsky, but everything he represented, those original Marxist traditions.
It's a really stark reminder of the life and death stakes involved. So, okay, let's try and pull the threads together from this deep dive. We started with Bloody Sunday, that initial explosion of violence that, according to these sources, kicked things off. Then Lenin, fighting external enemies, yes, but also fighting that internal bureaucratic threat right at the end, leaving his testament as a warning.
Exactly. And then Trotsky picking up that fight, trying to preserve what they see as the genuine Bolshevism against Stalin's bureaucratic counter-revolution, ultimately paying with his life. And the whole point of recounting this history for these writers isn't just academic. It's meant as a lesson for today.
Right, that's the final turn. They connect it directly to the present. They argue this knowledge isn't just interesting history, it needs to be understood and used. They end with a pretty direct challenge, don't they? Asking the reader point blank, are you a communist? Then get organized.
Yeah, it's a call to action. It underlines that for the authors, history isn't passive. It's a guide, maybe even a weapon for current struggles. And to really grasp their logic, their interpretation of why all this happened, 1905, 1917, the degeneration, the opposition you need to engage with their core theoretical tools, concepts like dialectical materialism, historical materialism, Marxist economics, imperialism, those are the frameworks they use to make sense of it all.
A powerful conclusion to their narrative. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a very specific and often controversial reading of revolutionary history. We definitely encourage you, the listener, to look into those theoretical ideas they mention and how they shape the understanding of these major historical conflicts. We'll catch you next time.